Yandy's face went completely blank the second Mendeecees slammed his glass down on that dinner table and said, "You really want me to talk? Because if I talk tonight, this whole marriage is finished." The room went silent so fast you could literally hear forks dropping onto plates while cameras rushed closer trying not to miss a single second of the chaos. Nobody expected the argument to explode that badly. What started as a tense conversation about loyalty, money, and rumors behind the scenes suddenly turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments fans say they have ever seen on Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. And the craziest part? Yandy looked terrified. Not angry, not shocked, terrified. Sources close to production are now claiming the fight became so heated that producers actually stepped in because Mendeecees allegedly threatened to expose secrets he had been keeping for years. We are talking about hidden financial problems, cheating accusations, fake friendships inside the cast, and even private conversations that were never supposed to leave their home. Fans online immediately started connecting the dots after noticing Yandy repeatedly trying to stop him from speaking every time he raised his voice. "She knows exactly what he's about to say," one fan posted. Another wrote, "That man has been holding stuff in for years." But things became even messier once other cast members got involved. Rashida reportedly tried calming the situation down while Spice looked completely stunned watching the couple go at each other. Meanwhile, several people at the event allegedly walked out after Mendeecees shouted, "I protected everybody in this room." Protected them from what though? That is the question driving social media insane right now because insiders claim this was not just a normal husband and wife argument. According to people close to the show, old betrayals, hidden alliances, and shocking secrets from previous seasons may finally be coming to light. And after Yandy screamed, "Don't do this on camera," fans became convinced something much bigger is hiding underneath the surface. The tension inside that private cast dinner was already thick before Yandy even walked through the door because everybody had been whispering for weeks that her marriage with Mendeecees was hanging on by a thread. Cameras caught her arriving nearly 40 minutes late with a cold expression on her face while Mendeecees sat at the far end of the table barely speaking to anyone. Spice tried joking around to lighten the mood, but nobody was really laughing because the energy between them looked dark from the beginning. One producer was even heard asking another if they should separate the seating arrangement because the couple had apparently been arguing all day before filming started. But Yandy insisted they sit together, and according to insiders, that decision turned into the biggest mistake of the night. The moment she sat down, Mendeecees would not even look at her. He just kept staring into his drink while tapping his fingers against the glass. Rashida noticed it immediately and quietly asked Yandy if everything was okay, but before she could answer, Mendeecees suddenly laughed under his breath and said, "Yeah, ask her that again when the cameras stop rolling." The entire table froze because his tone sounded bitter and personal. Yandy instantly fired back asking him why he was trying to embarrass her in front of everyone, but he looked directly at her and said, "Embarrass you? Nah, if I wanted to embarrass you, I'd really start talking." Several cast members exchanged nervous looks because nobody expected things to escalate that quickly. Carly Red reportedly leaned over and whispered, "Oh, this is about to get bad." Yandy tried smiling through the tension and told everyone they were just dealing with normal marriage stress, but Mendeecees was clearly done pretending. He interrupted her and said, "Stop lying for these people. Stop acting like everything perfect when you know it ain't." The room became painfully quiet. Even the waiters stopped moving around the table because the argument suddenly felt too real. Then Yandy made the mistake that pushed him over the edge. She accused him of acting differently ever since people started questioning his loyalty online. The second she mentioned social media rumors, Mendeecees slammed his hand on the table so hard that multiple glasses shook. "Don't play with me tonight," he warned her while everybody stared in complete shock. Yandy rolled her eyes and said she was tired of protecting him while he continued disrespecting her behind closed doors. But Mendeecees laughed again, except this time there was no humor in it. "Protecting me?" he snapped. "You want to talk about protection? You better stop before I expose everything." The word everything echoed across the room and suddenly everybody looked uncomfortable. Even the producers moved closer because they sensed something major was about to happen. Yandy's entire face changed after that comment. Her confident attitude disappeared instantly and she started nervously adjusting her necklace while looking toward production like she wanted filming to stop. But Mendeecees kept going. He accused her of creating fake storylines for sympathy and claimed she cared more about public image than their actual marriage. "You so busy trying to look strong on TV you forgot how to be real at home," he told her. Yandy shot back saying he was the one acting fake and hiding secrets, but that only made him angrier. Nah, he said while leaning closer to her, you don't want secrets coming out. Trust me. At that point Spice finally jumped in trying to calm things down. She told both of them they were saying things they could never take back, but Mendeecees ignored her completely. Instead he turned toward the rest of the cast and said something that left everyone speechless. Half the people at this table know exactly what she's been doing behind the scenes. Suddenly all eyes moved toward Yandy. Her jaw tightened immediately. She demanded he explain himself, but instead of answering directly, he started mentioning strange details that confused everyone. He talked about late-night meetings, hidden phone calls, and somebody allegedly moving money without him knowing. The accusations sounded so serious that even security started paying attention. Yandy kept interrupting him, begging him not to discuss personal business on camera, but he looked completely done holding back. You should have thought about that before you started playing games with me, he shouted. Fans online later claimed you could literally see fear in Yandy's eyes during that moment because she kept trying to change the subject every time he got too specific. Then things became even more chaotic once a producer accidentally revealed that the couple had nearly refused to film together earlier that week after another explosive argument happened inside their home. According to insiders, the fight involved accusations of betrayal from both sides. That revelation sent the table into complete madness. Kendra looked stunned while Scrappy reportedly muttered, "Ain't no coming back from this." But the biggest shock came seconds later when Mendeecees pulled out his phone and waved it in the air. You think I won't show receipts? He yelled. The entire room erupted at once. Yandy immediately stood up from her chair trying to grab the phone while screaming his name. Multiple cast members rushed between them because the situation looked like it was about to turn physical. Producers started yelling for everyone to calm down, but Mendeecees kept shouting over them saying he was tired of protecting people who never protected him. Then he pointed directly at Yandy and said, "You built this perfect wife image off lies." Nobody could believe what they were hearing. Yandy looked seconds away from tears while begging him to stop talking. But instead of calming down, Mendeecees suddenly exposed the fact that somebody in their inner circle had allegedly been leaking private information about their marriage to bloggers for months. The second he said that, everybody around the table started accusing each other. Spice looked furious. Rashida kept asking who the leak was. Carly Red demanded names. Meanwhile Yandy completely lost control and screamed, "You are destroying this family right now," but Mendeecees stared directly at her and quietly replied, "Nah. The truth been destroying this family for a long time." The silence after that comment felt unbearable because nobody at the table knew what to say next. Yandy stood frozen beside her chair while Mendeecees kept gripping his phone like he was seconds away from exposing something explosive. Producers were whispering into headsets, security moved closer to the cast, and several people at the dinner looked ready to leave altogether. But before anybody could calm the situation down, Carly Red suddenly asked the question everybody had been thinking. What truth? The second those words left her mouth, Yandy snapped and demanded that nobody entertain his behavior. She accused Mendeecees of trying to create drama for attention, but he immediately fired back saying she was the one obsessed with appearances. You care more about what these fans think than what happens in your own house, he told her while shaking his head in disgust. Spice looked deeply uncomfortable at that point because the argument no longer sounded like reality television drama. It sounded like years of resentment finally exploding in public. Then Mendeecees started pacing around the table while speaking louder and louder. Everybody think Yandy this perfect ride or die wife, he said. But they don't know what really be happening when these cameras off. Yandy instantly yelled at him to stop lying, but he ignored her completely. Instead he started talking about a mysterious trip Yandy allegedly took months earlier that she never fully explained to him. The room immediately filled with gasps. Rashida tried stepping in again asking them to handle the situation privately, but Mendeecees looked emotionally exhausted. Private? He laughed bitterly. Ain't nothing private anymore, not after people started running their mouths to bloggers. Yandy looked furious hearing that because she immediately accused one of his close friends of leaking stories first. Suddenly the conversation turned into a screaming match involving multiple people at the table. Scrappy reportedly stood up trying to separate them while producers begged everybody to sit back down. Meanwhile fans online later noticed that Yandy kept looking nervous every time Mendeecees mentioned receipts. Social media exploded with theories within minutes after the preview aired. Some fans believed he had proof of cheating while others thought the argument was really about hidden financial problems. But inside that restaurant, things only got uglier. Mendeecees suddenly turned toward one of the cameras and said, "People think they know our marriage because of Instagram posts and fake smiles. They don't know half of it." Yandy interrupted him, screaming that he was humiliating her intentionally. "You already made me look stupid enough," she shouted. But Mendeecees stopped walking and stared directly at her before saying something that left everybody stunned. "Nah, you made yourself look stupid the second you started lying to me." The room exploded again. Kendra covered her mouth in shock while Spice whispered, "This is getting dangerous." According to insiders, production briefly considered shutting filming down completely because emotions were spiraling out of control. But then Yandy made another accusation that completely changed the atmosphere. She claimed Mendeecees had been secretly meeting with someone she did not trust for months. At first everybody assumed she meant another woman, but then she clarified she was talking about someone connected to business deals involving the show. Mendeecees immediately denied doing anything shady, but Yandy would not back down. "You think I don't know what been happening behind my back?" she yelled. "You think I don't know who you been talking to?" Suddenly all the cast members looked confused because the argument now sounded deeper than relationship drama. Mendeecees looked furious after that accusation and finally unlocked his phone. Yandy's eyes widened instantly. "Don't you dare," she warned him while moving closer. But he started scrolling through messages anyway. "Since everybody wanna know why I'm mad," he shouted, "maybe I should show these texts." Producers rushed toward him immediately, trying to stop him from revealing anything sensitive on camera. Meanwhile, Yandy looked completely panicked. Fans online later pointed out that her hands were visibly shaking during the scene. One producer could reportedly be heard begging Mendeecees to calm down because revealing private messages might create legal problems for the network. But he no longer cared. "Everybody always protecting her image," he yelled. "Who protected me?" Then he started reading parts of a conversation out loud. Although several words were bleeped during editing, viewers could still hear enough to realize the messages involved somebody discussing money, secrets, and keeping stories hidden from the public. The cast looked absolutely stunned. Spice repeatedly asked if the messages were real while Rashida looked too shocked to even speak. Yandy tried snatching the phone again, but security stepped between them before the situation became physical. Then came the moment fans are still arguing about online. Mendeecees looked directly at Yandy and accused her of manipulating situations for sympathy whenever their relationship started falling apart. "Every season you paint yourself like the victim," he told her. "But nobody talks about what you do." Yandy screamed back that she had sacrificed everything for him, including her reputation and peace of mind. "I held this family together while you kept breaking it apart," she cried. For a second it actually looked like Mendeecees felt guilty because his expression softened slightly. But then another cast member accidentally made things worse by asking whether cheating was involved. The entire room went silent again. Yandy refused to answer while Mendeecees laughed under his breath. "See," he said, "that silence telling y'all everything." Immediately fans online lost their minds. Blogs started posting clips within minutes claiming the marriage was officially over. Hashtags related to the fight began trending as viewers desperately tried decoding what secrets were being hidden. But back at the dinner, the emotional damage was already severe. Yandy finally sat back down looking completely drained while tears formed in her eyes. Rashida rubbed her shoulder trying to comfort her, but Mendeecees still looked angry enough to explode again at any second. Then he quietly said something that shifted the entire mood from anger to heartbreak. "I don't even recognize us anymore." The pain in his voice caught everybody off guard because for the first time all night he sounded genuinely hurt instead of furious. Even Yandy looked shaken hearing it, but before anybody could respond, a producer walked over and whispered something into Yandy's ear that made her face turn pale instantly. According to insiders, production had just informed her that another cast member was arriving with information connected to the situation. And judging from the terrified look on Yandy's face, whatever was coming next threatened to expose even more secrets than anybody at that table was prepared for. Yandy immediately demanded to know who was coming, but the producer refused to answer loudly enough for the cameras to catch it. That only made the entire cast more nervous because by now everybody could tell this argument had opened the door to something much bigger than a simple marital fight. Mendeecees leaned back in his chair with a cold smile on his face like he already knew exactly what was about to happen. "Nah," he muttered quietly, "let them come in. I'm tired of hiding stuff." Yandy shot him a furious look and warned him that if he crossed certain lines there would be no fixing their marriage after tonight. But he looked completely emotionally checked out. Fans later said that was the exact moment they realized the relationship might truly be over because there was no warmth left between them at all. Then the restaurant doors finally opened and everybody turned around at once. The energy inside the room shifted instantly after a familiar face walked in carrying a folder in one hand and a phone in the other. Multiple cast members looked genuinely confused while Yandy's face dropped completely. According to insiders, she had no idea this person had been invited to filming. The second they approached the table, Yandy stood up again and demanded producers stop recording. "This is messy and evil," she shouted while trying to remove her microphone. But production refused to cut cameras because the entire cast was already reacting in shock. Mendeecees stayed calm though, too calm, and that scared Yandy even more. The mystery guest sat down slowly before looking directly at Yandy and saying, "You really thought nobody was gonna speak up?" The room exploded with tension again. Spice looked stunned while Rashida kept asking what was going on. Then the guest revealed they allegedly had proof that certain stories about Yandy and Mendeecees had been secretly planted online to control public opinion during previous seasons. Everybody started talking over each other immediately. Yandy denied everything while accusing Mendeecees of setting the whole thing up to humiliate her. But he swore he had nothing to do with the guest's arrival. "Truth don't need setup," he replied coldly. Then things became even more uncomfortable once the guest started mentioning private conversations involving money problems, fake reconciliations for television, and arguments that allegedly became far worse behind closed doors than fans ever realized. According to them, both Yandy and Mendeecees had spent years pretending things were stable while secretly living separate emotional lives. The family was left divided hearing the accusations because nobody knew what to believe anymore. Scrappy reportedly whispered, "This marriage been broken." Meanwhile, Yandy looked completely overwhelmed as more details started spilling out. At one point she broke down crying and accused everybody at the table of enjoying her pain. "All y'all sitting here judging me while my life falling apart," she screamed through tears. Rashida tried comforting her again, but the damage was already done. Mendeecees suddenly interrupted the emotional moment by asking the guest to explain one specific rumor connected to a late-night meeting at a hotel months earlier. The second he mentioned the hotel, Yandy's expression changed instantly. She looked panicked again. Fans online later replayed that scene repeatedly trying to figure out what the meeting actually involved. The guest claimed they saw Yandy meeting privately with someone connected to the show while Mendeecees was out of town. Yandy denied cheating immediately and said the meeting was business-related, but Mendeecees looked unconvinced. "Business don't happen at midnight behind closed doors," he snapped. Yandy screamed back that he was twisting the situation to make her look guilty, but several cast members already looked suspicious. Kendra even asked why she never told Mendeecees about the meeting in the first place. Yandy struggled answering the question, and that silence only made things worse. Meanwhile, social media went insane once preview clips leaked online. Fans started accusing both sides of hiding secrets while bloggers posted theories every few minutes. Some viewers defended Yandy, saying Mendeecees was publicly humiliating his wife for revenge, while others believed his anger came from years of betrayal and frustration. But inside the restaurant, emotions kept boiling higher. Mendeecees suddenly admitted he had considered leaving the marriage months earlier after discovering information he claimed changed everything. The entire table gasped again. Yandy looked devastated hearing him say it out loud. "So why didn't you leave?" she asked through tears. His answer shocked everybody. "Because I kept hoping you'd finally tell the truth yourself." For a brief moment nobody spoke. Even production stayed silent because the pain between them felt painfully real. Then Yandy finally exploded emotionally in a way fans had never seen before. She accused Mendeecees of emotionally abandoning her during some of the hardest periods of her life while pretending to support her publicly. "You checked out on me a long time ago," she cried. "You left me alone while I carried everything." Mendeecees looked hurt by the comment, but instead of denying it, he admitted their relationship had become toxic. "We've been surviving off appearances," he said quietly. "Not love." That statement hit the table like a bomb. Spice literally covered her face while Rashida started tearing up herself. The family was left divided, watching two people completely unravel in front of cameras after years of presenting themselves as strong partners. But the most explosive twist came seconds later when the guest suddenly claimed there were recordings. Everybody froze. Yandy immediately shouted that the person was lying, but the guest held up their phone and said they had audio connected to conversations about protecting images, hiding certain truths, and controlling storylines before filming. The second those words came out, producers rushed toward the cameras again because the legal situation suddenly became dangerous territory for the network. Mendeecees looked shocked too because even he apparently did not know recordings existed. Yandy begged production to end filming immediately while accusing the guest of trying to destroy her life. But the guest calmly replied, "Your secrets destroyed your life before I ever walked in here." The tension became unbearable. Several cast members left the table entirely while others stayed frozen watching the disaster unfold. Then Mendeecees slowly stood up, looked directly at Yandy, and said something that made her completely break down crying. "I wanted us to survive this," he told her softly. "But I don't think we know how to stop hurting each other anymore." Yandy was still crying when Mendeecees said that, but the emotion in the room did not settle. It actually made things heavier. The kind of heavy silence where nobody knows if the next sentence will heal something or destroy it completely. She wiped her face quickly, trying to regain control, but her voice came out shaky when she said, "So this is it? You're just going to sit here and let strangers rewrite our marriage?" Mendeecees shook his head slowly, like he was tired more than angry now. "It's not strangers," he replied. "It's everything we've been avoiding." That line hit harder than any shouting match because for a moment it sounded less like blame and more like exhaustion. The guest still sitting at the table adjusted the folder again, clearly aware they were holding information that could shift everything once more. Producers hovered in the background, visibly stressed, while cast members who had tried to leave earlier now stood just outside the frame watching. Spice whispered to Rashida that the situation felt like it had gone too far to fix on camera. But before anyone could calm it down, Yandy suddenly turned toward the guest and demanded they show whatever they were hiding instead of dropping bombs and smiling about it. The guest responded by placing the phone on the table and saying, "You both agreed to certain conversations years ago. Don't act surprised now." That statement triggered Mendeecees instantly. He leaned forward and asked what exactly was on the phone. The guest did not answer directly. Instead, they played a short audio clip. The sound was low at first, unclear voices, then Yandy's voice became recognizable, followed by Mendeecees speaking over her. The room reacted immediately. People started talking at once, some saying it sounded like a private argument, others saying it sounded like business discussions that were never meant for public ears. Yandy covered her mouth and shook her head repeatedly, insisting it was taken out of context. But Mendeecees went completely still, listening carefully like he was trying to place the moment. When the clip ended, he slowly leaned back and said, "That's from that night." Yandy snapped at him immediately, telling him not to confirm anything without thinking. But it was too late. The atmosphere changed again. Now it was not just about accusations. It was about confirmation and memory. Fans later said this was the moment the fight stopped feeling like drama and started feeling like history unraveling in real time. Rashida asked quietly what night they were talking about, but nobody answered her directly. Instead, Mendeecees stood up and started pacing again, this time slower, like he was choosing his words carefully. "We made decisions back then," he said, looking between Yandy and the guest. "Decisions that were supposed to stay between us." Yandy immediately cut him off, saying those decisions were never meant to be used against her. Her voice rose again, but it sounded more desperate than angry. Mendeecees replied that it was not about use, it was about truth finally coming out after years of silence. That word silence seemed to shake her. She looked around the table as if searching for support, but most people were too stunned to step in. Even the guest looked less aggressive now, almost clinical in how they were observing the breakdown. Then Yandy made a different move. She turned to production and said they were being manipulated by someone outside the cast who wanted to create chaos for attention. Producers did not respond, but the camera kept rolling. Mendeecees heard her and let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You always say somebody else controlling the story," he said. "But what if the story just yours too?" That question did not get answered. Instead, Yandy stood up again and said she would not continue filming under these conditions. She tried to remove her mic a second time, but production gently stopped her, telling her to just sit and breathe. She refused. The argument then shifted again when the guest finally spoke directly to her, saying they were not there to destroy her but to clarify inconsistencies. Yandy fired back that no clarification required public humiliation. Mendeecees interrupted both of them and said something that silenced the room again. "I'm not even mad anymore," he said. "I'm just done pretending we don't know what we know." That sentence landed differently. It was not loud. It was final sounding. Yandy looked at him like she was trying to understand when exactly he stopped fighting for them. Her voice lowered when she asked, "So you really believe all of this?" Mendeecees hesitated before answering. That hesitation was enough for everyone to notice. Finally he said, "I believe enough to know we can't go back to what we were pretending." The word pretending became the breaking point. Yandy shook her head, tears returning, but now mixed with anger. She told him he was rewriting their entire life based on anger and outside influence. He replied that she was rewriting it with silence and denial. The guest then quietly added that there were more conversations, more proof, and possibly more people involved than anyone at that table wanted to admit. That statement caused immediate panic among cast members. Spice said out loud that this had turned into something far beyond a couple's fight. Rashida agreed, saying they needed to step away from cameras. But production still did not cut. Yandy looked exhausted now, her voice lower when she said, "If there's more, just say it all. End it." That challenge hung in the air. Mendeecees looked at her for a long time before responding. When he finally spoke, it was not loud, but it shifted everything again. "You don't want it all," he said. "Because, all, includes things you asked me to bury with you." That line ended the moment in a way nobody could respond to. Even the guest stopped talking. The room felt stuck between exposure and regret, as if every person there suddenly understood they were witnessing something that could not be undone once fully revealed. Yandy was still crying when Mendeecees said that, but the emotion in the room did not settle. It actually made things heavier. The kind of heavy silence where nobody knows if the next sentence will heal something or destroy it completely. She wiped her face quickly, trying to regain control, but her voice came out shaky when she said, "So this is it? You're just going to sit here and let strangers rewrite our marriage?" Mendeecees shook his head slowly, like he was tired more than angry now. "It's not strangers," he replied. "It's everything we've been avoiding." That line hit harder than any shouting match because for a moment it sounded less like blame and more like exhaustion. The guest still sitting at the table adjusted the folder again, clearly aware they were holding information that could shift everything once more. Producers hovered in the background, visibly stressed, while cast members who had tried to leave earlier now stood just outside the frame watching. Spice whispered to Rashida that the situation felt like it had gone too far to fix on camera. But before anyone could calm it down, Yandy suddenly turned toward the guest and demanded they show whatever they were hiding instead of dropping bombs and smiling about it. The guest responded by placing the phone on the table and saying, "You both agreed to certain conversations years ago. Don't act surprised now." That statement triggered Mendeecees instantly. He leaned forward and asked what exactly was on the phone. The guest did not answer directly. Instead, they played a short audio clip. The sound was low at first, unclear voices, then Yandy's voice became recognizable, followed by Mendeecees speaking over her. The room reacted immediately. People started talking at once, some saying it sounded like a private argument, others saying it sounded like business discussions that were never meant for public ears. Yandy covered her mouth and shook her head repeatedly, insisting it was taken out of context. But Mendeecees went completely still, listening carefully like he was trying to place the moment. When the clip ended, he slowly leaned back and said, "That's from that night." Yandy snapped at him immediately, telling him not to confirm anything without thinking. But it was too late. The atmosphere changed again. Now it was not just about accusations. It was about confirmation and memory. Fans later said this was the moment the fight stopped feeling like drama and started feeling like history unraveling in real time. Rashida asked quietly what night they were talking about, but nobody answered her directly. Instead, Mendeecees stood up and started pacing again, this time slower, like he was choosing his words carefully. "We made decisions back then," he said, looking between Yandy and the guest. "Decisions that were supposed to stay between us." Yandy immediately cut him off, saying those decisions were never meant to be used against her. Her voice rose again, but it sounded more desperate than angry. Mendeecees replied that it was not about use, it was about truth finally coming out after years of silence. That word silence seemed to shake her. She looked around the table as if searching for support, but most people were too stunned to step in. Even the guest looked less aggressive now, almost clinical in how they were observing the breakdown. Then Yandy made a different move. She turned to production and said they were being manipulated by someone outside the cast who wanted to create chaos for attention. Producers did not respond, but the camera kept rolling. Mendeecees heard her and let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You always say somebody else controlling the story," he said. "But what if the story just yours too?" That question did not get answered. Instead, Yandy stood up again and said she would not continue filming under these conditions. She tried to remove her mic a second time, but production gently stopped her, telling her to just sit and breathe. She refused. The argument then shifted again when the guest finally spoke directly to her, saying they were not there to destroy her but to clarify inconsistencies. Yandy fired back that no clarification required public humiliation. Mendeecees interrupted both of them and said something that silenced the room again. I'm not even mad anymore, he said. I'm just done pretending we don't know what we know. That sentence landed differently. It was not loud. It was final sounding. Yandy looked at him like she was trying to understand when exactly he stopped fighting for them. Her voice lowered when she asked, so you really believe all of this? Mendeecees hesitated before answering. That hesitation was enough for everyone to notice. Finally he said, I believe enough to know we can't go back to what we were pretending. The word pretending became the breaking point. Yandy shook her head, tears returning, but now mixed with anger. She told him he was rewriting their entire life based on anger and outside influence. He replied that she was rewriting it with silence and denial. The guest then quietly added that there were more conversations, more proof, and possibly more people involved than anyone at that table wanted to admit. That statement caused immediate panic among cast members. Spice said out loud that this had turned into something far beyond a couple's fight. Rashida agreed, saying they needed to step away from cameras. But production still did not cut. Yandy looked exhausted now, her voice lower when she said, if there's more, just say it all. End it. That challenge hung in the air. Mendeecees looked at her for a long time before responding. When he finally spoke, it was not loud, but it shifted everything again. You don't want it all, he said. Because, all, includes things you asked me to bury with you. That line ended the moment in a way nobody could respond to. Even the guest stopped talking. The room felt stuck between exposure and regret, as if every person there suddenly understood they were witnessing something that could not be undone once fully revealed. Yandy stared at Mendeecees like she was trying to understand whether he had just accused her of something real or whether he was speaking out of pure frustration. The words, things you asked me to bury with you, kept echoing around the table, and nobody was bold enough to break that silence. Even the guest looked down for a second, as if recalculating what to reveal next. Rashida finally spoke up softly, asking what he meant by bury, but Mendeecees did not answer right away. Instead, he pulled the chair back slowly and sat down again, rubbing his forehead like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. Yandy shook her head, her voice trembling when she said, don't you dare twist my words into something dirty on camera. Mendeecees looked up at her and replied calmly, I'm not twisting anything. I'm remembering it differently than you are. That sentence made the situation worse because now it was not just conflict, it was conflicting versions of the same past. Spice whispered that they were no longer arguing about the present, but about who gets to define their history. The guest then leaned forward again and said they were only there because certain information had been requested by someone within their circle months ago. That detail made several cast members react at once. Scrappy asked who would even request something like that, but the guest refused to name anyone directly. Instead, they placed another document on the table. Yandy immediately reached out to stop it, but Mendeecees gently lifted his hand, signaling her to let it happen. That small gesture surprised everyone because it showed he was no longer resisting exposure. Yandy looked at him, almost pleading, asking why he was allowing this to continue. He answered without looking away from the document. Because hiding it already destroyed us, he said. The guest opened the folder slightly and mentioned dates, meetings, and agreements that allegedly shaped what the public saw on earlier seasons. Yandy interrupted again, insisting that agreements are normal in reality television and not evidence of wrongdoing. The guest agreed but said this was not about contracts, it was about personal boundaries being crossed in private conversations. That distinction changed the mood again. Mendeecees suddenly asked the guest if any of the information suggested betrayal. The guest hesitated, then said there were patterns that could be interpreted that way depending on context. Yandy immediately stood up and said she was done with vague accusations designed to humiliate her. Her voice cracked halfway through, showing how exhausted she had become from defending herself. Mendeecees watched her carefully, then said something quieter but sharper. You keep saying humiliation, he said. But what about honesty? Yandy replied that honesty without loyalty was just cruelty. That line made a few people at the table nod unconsciously because it hit emotionally even in the chaos. The guest then played another short recording, but this one was different. It sounded like a private conversation about trust and public image, and although nothing directly incriminating was said, the tone suggested negotiation over how something would be presented to viewers. Yandy immediately said it was edited and out of context. Mendeecees did not argue this time. Instead, he just said, that sounds like us. That admission, even though vague, changed the energy again. Fans later said it felt like both of them were finally acknowledging that their relationship had always been partially shaped by the cameras. Rashida quietly asked if they had ever been fully honest even with themselves. Nobody answered. Then Yandy turned back to Mendeecees and asked him directly if he was trying to end their marriage on television. He shook his head and said, "I didn't bring this here alone." That statement suggested shared responsibility, not just blame. Yandy's expression softened for a moment, but only briefly, before she asked him why he never stopped it before it reached this point. He replied, "Because every time I tried, you said we were fine." That line made her pause. The guest then added that according to what they had seen, both of them had contributed to shaping a narrative that no longer matched reality. Scrappy muttered that nobody survives that kind of gap between public and private life. Spice looked emotional now, saying quietly that they were watching two people realize too late that they had been performing stability for years. Mendeecees leaned forward again and asked the guest one final question, whether there was anything in the material that showed intent to harm or just emotional confusion. The guest said it was not about harm, but about control of narrative and fear of exposure. Yandy immediately reacted to that word fear, saying she was not afraid of anything being true, only afraid of lies being accepted as truth. Mendeecees looked at her and replied, "Then let it all come out." That sentence landed heavily again. But before anything else could happen, the guest revealed that there was still one final piece they had not shown yet, and this one involved a conversation that allegedly changed the direction of their entire relationship. Yandy's face dropped instantly when she heard that. Mendeecees went completely quiet, staring at the table as if already preparing himself for whatever came next. The room, already stretched thin with tension, felt like it was one step away from collapse, and everyone present understood that whatever was about to be revealed could not be taken back once spoken aloud. The room had gone so still that even the background noise from the restaurant felt distant, like everyone had been pulled into the same narrow space where nothing else mattered except what would be said next. Yandy stood there with her hands slightly raised, not in anger now but in disbelief, like she was trying to hold the moment back from moving forward. Mendeecees stayed seated, but his eyes did not leave the table, as if he was already bracing himself for impact. The guest looked between them for a long second before finally saying there was one final recording, and this one had been shared by someone who claimed it explained everything that had been building for months. Yandy immediately shook her head and said she would not sit through another public breakdown of her life, but Mendeecees quietly told her to let it play. That alone surprised everyone because it sounded like he was accepting consequences instead of fighting them. Producers moved closer again, tension rising as the device was unlocked and placed on the table. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the recording started. It was softer than the others, almost calm at first, but the words quickly made it clear it was a private conversation between Yandy and Mendeecees during a time when things were already unstable. What made it worse was not accusations or shouting, but the emotional tone, the kind of honesty people only speak when they think no one else will ever hear it. Yandy's face changed instantly as she recognized it. "Turn it off," she said quickly, her voice breaking. But it kept playing. Mendeecees closed his eyes for a moment, listening, and when it ended, he did not speak right away. The silence after it felt heavier than any argument before it. Then he finally said, very quietly, "So this is what we became." Yandy looked at him, tears in her eyes, and replied, "No, this is what they turned it into." But even she did not sound fully certain anymore. The guest gathered the folder slowly, saying there was no more to show, but the damage was already done. Rashida looked exhausted, whispering that some things were never meant to be played out in public. Spice agreed, saying it felt like watching a relationship collapse in slow motion with nowhere to step in and stop it. Scrappy shook his head, saying the industry had a way of exposing pain and calling it entertainment. Mendeecees finally stood up again, this time not in anger, but in resignation. He looked at Yandy for a long moment before saying, "I don't hate you. I just don't recognize what we're defending anymore." Yandy nodded slightly, almost like she understood, but it hurt her to accept it. She replied, "We're defending what we built, even if it broke along the way." That line lingered, but there was no clear answer left between them. The guest stepped away from the table, and production slowly began pulling back, as if the storm had passed but left destruction behind it. Cameras still captured the final image of them sitting apart, no longer arguing, just separated by everything that had been said. Fans watching later described it as the moment a love story stopped being a story and became a question with no resolution. And now nothing is the same in the world of love and hip-hop Atlanta after this explosive night. Mendeecees and Yandy are left with questions they cannot ignore, and the truth that came out in fragments has only made fans wonder what was real, what was staged, and what was hidden for years behind the cameras. Was this the final breaking point for their marriage, or just another chapter in a relationship built under pressure and public attention? Viewers are divided, social media is in chaos, and everyone is asking the same thing: what really happens when the cameras stop rolling and there is nowhere left to hide? If you are watching this unfold, tell what you think really happened between them in the comments. Do you believe this was the truth finally coming out, or just another moment twisted by pressure and reality television drama? Like the video if you want more updates like this, and subscribe so you do not miss what happens next, because this story is not fully finished yet, and the next move could change everything again.